Hello. Education is kind of like a business, okay? In any business, like what you see everywhere around you, there are primarily two sets of faculties involved. One is at the giving end, and the other is at the receiving end. What is given should be given so with utmost professionalism, and what is received should also be done so in the same manner. Okay, like in any business, people aspire to grow. Huh? Whether inward or outward, it's a matter to them. But in the field of education, which is also a business, money is a factor which ought to be taking the back seat. Well, then you might ask the question: what takes the back? What takes the front seat then? If money is going to the back seat, well, the thing that goes to the front seat is what is actually given and what is actually taken. Is as simple as that. Not much of a secret mystery or something. Well, for this business to grow and to give a lot of fruits in the long run to both the giver and the receiver, one should realize that what is being given and what is being received. What is being given is basically the knowledge and experience of the faculty who is at the giving end, and what is being received is a part of it, right? But what has been received will be interpreted in the student's mind based on their past experiences and based on their capabilities and based on what they intend to do with what they have just received. Say for example, if a teacher teaches about, let's say, how to do good business, okay, which will pretty much be based on some kind of a standard model or something, but definitely you can rest assured that he or she will always have their own opinions into it. But rather than that, what is being received in this particular scenario is based on their circumstances. Like for example, the student wants to open up a company later on down the lane. If he aspires to do so, then the kind of knowledge which is being delivered will be appropriate in that particular situation to him. And if the person who is at the receiving end has no influence in business or no experience in business or does not intend to do business later on, then what's the big use, right? So in which case the student should be taking the whole thing as a metaphysical learning experience. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by this is basically that when somebody says that, okay, so this is the money that you're getting and this is how you can distribute the money and this is and your resources, and then you put your money in right places and then do good business with the right kind of people, and then you can expect to have some right sense of profit, right? In a metaphorical perspective, it all comes back to the chicken and egg problem, okay? Whether you invested the time to get good sense out of it, or in order to get good sense of something, you invested your time in it, okay? So unless and until it becomes a chicken and egg problem, the student will always be learning something with perspective that, okay, I have learned something, how to use it and when to use it. Okay, the how to use it and when to use it question should actually be ingrained prior to the delivery of knowledge. If that is not being done, then the purpose of education is ill served, where the efficiency of what has been received by the student will be a bit more lesser in quality and also in quantity, to be honest. But regardless of these things, education has got to do with a quest for knowledge, and thus is the business model of education, and that is the mantra of education. When we say quest for knowledge, quest is an intriguing word because it leads to another very important word called as a question. As a student or as a learner, you should be, or he should be, or she should be in a very good position to ask good questions. So now this brings us to the point of what constitutes a good question. Now, what are the things which constitute a good question? there are two fundamental aspects to it in my opinion. The first one is the relevance of the question, and the second one is the accuracy of the question. Unless you ask relevant questions which are also accurate, you are not going to get answers which will satisfy you, which will enhance your skill set, which will enhance your knowledge base, or will it be useful in the further long run in your life. Okay, so always learn to ask good questions which are relevant and which are very accurate. What do I mean by accuracy? What defines accuracy? Okay, so your question should be specific to the field of knowledge, right? And your question should be dealing with one particular problem in mind. Okay, now if I ask a question, okay, why do things move around the way they do or move around me? Okay, so that's not an accurate question. Okay, it's a very broad and generalistic question which has multitudes of answers in the way you look at it, or the way a person who is going to answer that question is going to look at it. So that is not a very specific question, and hence it's not an accurate question either. But again, it depends. The accuracy depends on the scope of the knowledge that is being received. Okay, if you are talking from a metaphorical perspective, that's a very accurate question. But in the general sense of the word, say for example, consider an engineering college or a PUC or a higher secondary school where the student asks a question like this. Okay, it's a very inaccurate question. Say for example, another person asks this kind of question: Professor, I have this kind of an integral to solve, but somehow I'm not able to substitute the right terms into it so to get the answer out of it. So that constitutes a good question, and you should be augmenting your good question with facts and the problems that you're facing and why you are facing it. And then the teacher looks at the accurate question which you have so posed in front of him, with possibilities of how to answer your question, so that the answer that he or she gives will be most relevant to your question. Okay, so the relevance of the answer that you get depends on the accuracy of the question that you ask, and at the same time the relevance of the answer and the accuracy of the answer will also depend on the relevance of the question that you ask. Say for example, you are talking about I don't know much other fields, but I will talk from the perspective of mechanical engineering. Say for example mechanics, and you are doing dynamics of solids, and then you ask a question: Professor, what would happen if I do have an electromagnetic force somewhere over there? And then you could ask, how would this continue process? It's a very relevant question from the perspective of gaining knowledge. But in that particular class, at that particular syllabus that you're looking at, it's not a very relevant question. Okay, so that gives you a sense of what is relevance of a question. Okay, so you should be always keeping in mind as to how to make your questions more relevant, and you should also be keeping in mind as to how your questions can be made more accurate, so that the professor is going to give you good answers which appeal to you. Okay, they're not just the process is very wet. Okay, you know what I mean? It's not a dry process, it's a very wet process. When the person who is asking the question and the person put a lot of thinking behind it, there's a lot of chemistry in the way you ask a question. Okay, so you can sense when a person or when the student asks a question with a lot of intrigue in his mind or in a question, that you can understand, you can feel the energy in the way the question is being asked, and also in the wordings of the questions, and also in the way the question is framed. Okay, so this has to be cultivated, and this is pretty much an art and a craft by itself. So it's not something like, okay, he's good at asking questions. It's not something like that. He or she has developed a good skill of asking questions. If you want to develop good skill of asking questions, make sure that you know the space in which you are asking the question in. You should be asking a question which is not a very vague. Okay, you should not ask for the sake of asking. If you ask a question for the sake of asking, then the professor will realize it instantaneously, because they are experienced. And once they are experienced, and then they come to know that, oh, this guy is asking a question just for the sake of asking questions, and he wants to show up or anything, but then you're not going to get an accurate answer either. Maybe he's going to give you an accurate answer, but nevertheless it might not be very helpful to you, because you are not really at the receiving end, because you are as a student asking question from a giving end. You're giving the question. You're not without an intention to receive an answer. So you should give a question with an intention to receive an answer. Only then the question or the answer provided by the professor will be so helpful to you, so that you could actually learn from it and apply it. And when you actually ask a question with a lot of thinking behind asking your question, the answer will be the most striking, and it's almost as if that you are bypassing the revision kind of a thing. Okay, I asked this question, the professor said like this. Okay, so is that what you mean? Okay, no, there is no need for you to come back to this question and answer sections in your mind again and again and again. The fact that you ask this question with a lot of details in your mind is enough to get the solution ingrained in your mind. Okay, provided that you are interested in this, in a subject that you are talking about. And yes, pretty much these are what I wanted to talk about: how to ask a good question, and how to look at the student-teacher relationship in a classroom. This is just one small piece of the main topic. Hopefully that as engineering students, or even general students for that matter, even in school or anything, as a student, we should be open to learning, and we should be open to asking questions. And as a teacher, we should be very, 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 very open to criticism, extremely open to being asked with tough questions. And tough questions are the ones which will intrigue the teacher as well, not just the student. The student asks the question, the student asks a good question, assuming it's a good question, with a lot of intrigue. Now, the efficiency of the entire process, from the beginning to the end, from the beginning of the thought process in the mind to the end of the thought process in the mind after the student gets the answer, the efficiency of this whole process depends on the efficiency with which the student asked the question, and the efficiency with which the professor understood the question, and the efficiency with which the professor answered the questions in said and unsaid words and sentences.